The collision. The fog rolled in from the sea like a living thing, wrapping the harbor in gray silk as Mira clutched her canvas bag closer to her chest. Inside were 3 18th-century volumes she'd just purchased from the estate sale, delicate things with crumbling spines that would take weeks to restore. Her workshop waited 6 blocks away, but the evening mist made the familiar streets feel dreamlike and strange. She didn't see him until impact. Books flew from her arms, spinning through the damp air in a chaos of yellowed pages and leather covers. Mira gasped, dropping to her knees on the wet dock, her heart hammering as she watched her precious cargo scatter across the weathered planks. Strong hands appeared beside hers, carefully gathering the volumes with a tenderness that surprised her. "I'm so sorry. Are you hurt?" His voice was low, rough like sand beneath waves. Mira looked up, ready to unleash her frustration, but the words died on her lips. The man kneeling before her had storm-gray eyes that seemed to hold the entire ocean, deep, turbulent, impossible to read. Rain-dark hair fell across his forehead, and there was something haunted in the set of his jaw, something that made her anger dissolve into curiosity. "Thanks," she whispered, the words softer than she intended. "I thought they were ruined." Their fingers brushed as they both reached for the final book, and electricity sparked through that simple touch. Mira felt it race up her arm, settle somewhere behind her ribs. She should pull away, should take her books and hurry home to the safety of her workshop, where nothing unexpected ever happened. But she couldn't move. His eyes locked onto hers, and she watched something shift in their depths, surprise giving way to something more dangerous, more consuming. The fog pressed close around them, the world narrowing until there was only this: the rough wood beneath her knees, the distant cry of gulls, the way his gaze traced her face as though memorizing every detail. Mira's breath caught. She'd spent years binding broken things, but she'd never felt this particular kind of fracture. The sensation of carefully constructed walls beginning to crack, letting in light she wasn't sure she wanted, but couldn't resist. "I'm Jasper," he said, still holding her gaze, still touching that book between them. "I've just moved back to town." She knew she should stand, should walk away, should protect herself from whatever was building in the charged air between them. Instead, she heard herself say, "Mira, I restore books." "Beautiful work, for beautiful things," he murmured, and she knew with absolute certainty that he wasn't just talking about books anymore. The lighthouse horn sounded in the distance, breaking the spell. They both stood, but the moment had already embedded itself beneath Mira's skin, a splinter of want she couldn't quite reach to remove. The unfolding. Mira told herself it was coincidence when Jasper appeared at the harbor the next evening, leaning against the same weathered piling where they'd collided. She told herself the same thing the evening after that and the one following that. But by the 4th sunset, she stopped pretending she wasn't looking for him, stopped denying the way her pulse quickened when his silhouette emerged from the mist. "Do you always walk here?" he asked one evening, falling into step beside her. "Do you always wait for strangers?" she countered, hugging her cardigan tighter against the coastal wind. His laugh was quiet, almost sad. "You're not a stranger anymore." They walked the length of the dock as fishing boats returned with their daily catch, salt-heavy air filling the spaces between their words. Jasper told her about the research station where he'd spent the past 5 years studying deep-sea ecosystems, about creatures that lived in darkness so complete that it became its own kind of light. Mira shared stories of forgotten books she'd resurrected, love letters pressed between pages, inscriptions that revealed entire lifetimes. "Why did you come back?" she asked one evening as they sat on the dock's edge, legs dangling above dark water. Jasper was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, "Sometimes you have to return to the place you left to understand why you ran in the first place." His honesty cracked something open inside her. "I've never left. This town, my workshop, it's all I've ever known. Everyone else dreams of somewhere else, but I dream in pages and binding thread. Sometimes I wonder if that makes me small." Jasper turned to her then, his hand moving to cover hers on the weathered wood. The touch was deliberate this time, not an accident, but a choice. The woman who can resurrect forgotten stories, who gives voices back to the silenced, there's nothing small about that. Mira's breath hitched. In the fading light, his face was all sharp angles and shadows, but his eyes held that same intensity from their first meeting. Only now it felt less like collision, more like recognition. "Can I see your workshop?" The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither acknowledged. She should say no, should keep her sanctuary separate from whatever this was becoming. Instead, she nodded. The workshop was tucked behind the old Maritime Museum, a converted storage room that smelled of leather, glue, and old paper. Mira lit the oil lamps. She preferred their warm glow to electric lights, and watched Jasper move through her space with careful reverence. He examined her tools, her works in progress, the wall of completed restorations waiting for their owners. "It's like a hospital for stories," he said softly. "Or a resurrection chamber." Mira lifted a volume from her workbench, its spine completely detached. This one nearly drowned in a basement flood. The owner's grandmother's diary. She thought it was lost forever. Jasper moved closer, watching as Mira's ink-stained fingers traced the damaged binding with practiced gentleness. "You have careful hands," he said. "So do you." She'd noticed how he handled her books that first night, like they were living things that could feel pain. The space between them charged with awareness. Outside, fog pressed against the windows, cocooning them in amber lamplight and possibility. Jasper reached out, his fingertips ghosting along her wrist, following the blue veins visible beneath her pale skin. "Mira," he began, but whatever he meant to say dissolved when she turned her face up to him. They stood suspended in that breath before kissing, both afraid to move forward and unable to step back. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, and she felt herself leaning into that touch like a flower seeking sun. "I should go," Jasper whispered, but he didn't move. "You should," Mira agreed, but her hand had somehow found its way to his chest, feeling his heart thunder beneath her palm. The lighthouse beam swept past the window, and in that flash of brilliance, they both saw the truth. This wasn't something they could walk away from, no matter how much safer it might be to try. The awakening. The storm hit 3 days later with a fury that caught the entire coast off guard. Mira had been working late at the lighthouse keeper's cottage, a restoration project for the Maritime Society, when the rain turned violent and the wind began tearing at the shutters. The elderly keeper had gone to the mainland for the week, leaving her alone with books and howling darkness. She was gathering her things when the door burst open, rain and wind and Jasper tumbling through in a tangle of soaked jacket and desperate eyes. "The road's flooded," he gasped, pushing the door closed against the gale. "I saw your light from the harbor. I had to make sure—" He stopped, water dripping from his hair, chest heaving. "I had to know you were safe." Mira stared at him, this man who'd walked through a storm for her, and felt something inside her chest crack wide open. "You're soaked through." "I don't care." The cottage offered little: a fireplace, some blankets, tea supplies in the small kitchen. No way down until the storm passed. Mira built up the fire while Jasper peeled off his drenched jacket, his shirt clinging to his shoulders in ways that made her mouth go dry. "Here." She handed him a wool blanket, trying not to notice the way his muscles moved beneath wet fabric. They sat before the fire as the storm raged, the cottage walls shuddering with each gust. Warmth slowly returned to their bones, but a different kind of heat was building between them, something that had been gathering since that first collision on the dock. "Tell me something true," Mira whispered into the firelight. Jasper turned to her, shadows dancing across his face. "I left this town 5 years ago because I was drowning. My father died, my mother couldn't look at me without seeing him, and I felt like I was disappearing into everyone else's grief. I ran to the ocean because at least there the pressure was honest." His raw honesty deserved equal vulnerability. "I hide in my workshop, because out there, everything feels too big, too loud. Books don't demand anything except patience. They don't leave, they don't die,
They don't break your heart. And people do? Haven't they broken yours? Instead of answering, Jasper reached out. His fingers found the smudge of ink on her jaw. She always had ink somewhere on her skin. His touch lingered, and Mira's eyes fluttered closed at the tenderness of it. "You have ink here," he murmured, thumb brushing the spot. "And here?" His fingers traced her temple. "Here. Her knuckles. You wear your work like other people wear jewelry." Mira opened her eyes to find him impossibly close, his gray gaze molten in the firelight. "Jasper?" He kissed her then, and it was nothing like she'd imagined during all those nights lying awake thinking about him. It was better, desperate and gentle all at once, tasting of rain and want and everything they'd been holding back. His hand cupped her face as though she were something precious, something that might disappear if he loosened his grip. Mira's fingers tangled in his damp hair, pulling him closer, deeper. The blanket fell away as they shifted together, firelight painting their skin gold and shadow. His lips traced a path along her jaw, down her throat, and she heard herself make a sound she'd never made before, something between surrender and demand. "Tell me to stop," he breathed against her collarbone. "Tell me this is too fast, too much." "Don't stop," she whispered, and felt him shudder against her. They took their time discovering each other, the scar above his eyebrow from a childhood fall, the constellation of freckles across her shoulders that only appeared in summer. His hands mapped her body like uncharted territory, reverent and thorough, while her fingers traced the stories written in his skin, old wounds, new vulnerabilities, the places where he'd broken and healed wrong. When they finally came together, it was with a tenderness that made Mira's eyes sting. This wasn't just bodies seeking release, but souls recognizing something essential in each other. The way she fit against him, the rhythm they found without words, the soft sounds that meant more than poetry. Afterward, they lay tangled in blankets before the dying fire, Jasper's fingers tracing idle patterns on her bare shoulder. "I'm leaving in 3 months," he said quietly into the darkness. "There's an expedition to the Mariana Trench. I signed the contract before I came back." Mira felt the words like a physical blow, but she didn't pull away. 3 months. "I wanted to tell you before." He stopped, his hands stilling on her skin. "I'm sorry." She should be angry, should feel used. Instead, she pressed closer, memorizing the warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. "Then we have 3 months.
The return. 3 months became a number Mira wore like a scar. She marked Jasper's departure date in her mind, but refused to acknowledge it outwardly, burying herself deeper in restoration work that never quite filled the hollow space he'd left behind. The grandmother's diary was finished, perfect, returned to its weeping owner. The ship's logs were cataloged and repaired. Still, Mira found more projects, more broken things to fix, more reasons to avoid the empty evenings when silence pressed too close. The town moved on. Summer tourists arrived, bringing noise and color to streets that had felt gray since the storm. Mira's friends stopped asking if she was okay, accepting her wan smiles and assurances that she was fine, just busy. The lie tasted like ash, but it was easier than the truth. She didn't go to the harbor anymore. It was late September when the workshop door opened during the lunch hour she usually spent alone. Mira didn't look up from the Victorian atlas spread across her workbench, assuming it was the courier with another delivery. "We're closed," she said, not unkindly. "Come back at 2. "I don't think I can wait that long." The voice turned her blood to ice and fire simultaneously. Mira's hands froze over the delicate map she'd been mending, her heart slamming against her ribs so hard she thought it might crack them. Slowly, she lifted her head